Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and today we're starting a series on Return of the Obra Dinn. This is a independent game that came out in 2018. It's a puzzle game that I will immediately warn you that once you know the answers, it's pretty much impossible to ever forget them. There's been some cases where I've thought maybe 30 years down the line I might forget the solutions to certain puzzles, but honestly, some of that just stays with you for a lifetime. So I would heavily recommend, if you want to do a puzzle game, if you want to do a really highly well received puzzle game that does have this kind of unique, pointily pixelated imagery, just play this game. You won't be dissatisfied. If you're possibly a person that gets frustrated with puzzle games, you might want to stay. Or if you just don't care about being spoiled, odds are 2 years in, you've already been spoiled. I've already been spoiled, although I think I probably have forgotten at least half of the solutions here. I actually directly tweeted Lucas Pope saying it would be interesting if he could make a randomization on his game so you could do a new game plus, because there are certain names you have to attribute certain uh, effects to. Basically, you're playing as an insurance adjuster and you're finding out how people died, and whether or not they died doing their job or derelicting their duty, and thus you're trying to get the true story of what happened on the Obra Dinn, which is this ship that magically returned with nobody alive on board. Uh, there is some oddity here in that the audio is fairly loud, um, and I have it muted at the moment. I'm testing out a new thing, but I basically have to have it at like 1% of the audio volume uh, to even get it to a decent level where I like the audio to usually be. Um, it's very nice sea shanty music, as you will hear. The other issue, certainly because this is an indie game, and the reason why I'm playing it 2 years later is because the anniversary was like really the first time that this sold for $10. And honestly, I think that probably is the reasonable price for a game like this. Sometimes you just have to pay for indie games a little bit more, unfortunately. Um, it's because it's been $20 for 2 years, and I've been looking at it for 2 years and just thought to myself, man, that's too expensive. All right, let's unmute ourselves. So you now should be able to hear the music if all goes well, and otherwise all the audio should sound good. I'm in a state of flux, adding more and more equipment and more settings. Oddly, this is also seemingly a game that controls via an Xbox controller that's plugged um, into my computer, and I'm gonna give that a whirl. Although this is probably one of the worst games ever to try and play with a controller. There's really no good reason for it to even have controller support. Um, but yeah, that'll be easier than using a mouse and keyboard. Although mouse probably alone would be fine. I'm very interested, as someone who has a classical education in programming, how he made this new visual engine to do this kind of randomization scatter map to give you this pixel art. This pixel art is supposed to be representative or remind you of old Apple II computers, I believe. And it certainly shows, just to even a layman, you should be able to see how movement in frames is way more important around giving information than actual pixels. If any of these frames we were seeing were just paused, then you would say that's a pretty bad, pretty low resolution image. But because you have a consistent amount of either 60 frames per second or more happening, then your mind weaves the different frames together, giving you a much bigger image, or feeling of an image. Well, interestingly, Pressing any of the buttons on my controller does not let me start. But it did make the mouse cursor move. Like, that's weird. Let's click begin. No fates solved, begin. We're finding fates. Lost at sea, 1803, the good ship Obra Dinn, built in 1796, London, 800 tons, 18-foot draught. Captain R. WITTEREL. Crew is 51 men. Last voyage to the Orient Cape, rendezvous unmet. So this is a game all about paying attention. So R. WITTEREL is your first hint at the beginning who the captain is. And it moved ahead. Attention, Chief Inspector Insurance and Claims, London Office, the Honorable East India Company. The Obra Dinn is returned. Dispatch to Falmouth immediately and prepare for full assessment. So, there is a point to this to be mentioned in that this is a very different world than what you would just expect. This isn't just the past of 1807. This is also a world where you have a magical watch that's going to let you see the kind of stationary 3D images of someone's death.
What's in the box? I don't know. Hoist it up in a few minutes. Hey! How? Carefully.
So you have this guy. What's funny there is you have voice acting, but I thought he had kind of updated the game at one point. Yeah, the controller does work now. It just didn't work on the main menu. Where you could play as a female, which doesn't really mean anything. Like, you don't even see your own feet, and you don't really interact with anyone at all. So, there's kind of no reason for that. I thought that was an option, though, but I must be thinking of a different game. It would be a real easy update, certainly, because this is the last conversation we'll have. We can show, for a brief moment here, you have a IBM more green image, which a lot of these resolutions and monitors, IBM 5151, are not, these aren't things you should really be nostalgic for. They're all bad, like first generation computer monitors, or second generation, depending on where you wanted to separate the generations. It is also worth mentioning that on TVs, computers used to connect to more of tube TVs, and some of the colors that were more like a that look pretty awful now, but particularly CGA graphics games actually looked a lot better than they do. Like, ideally, this is where you would want to be. This is a modern LCD, just black and white, the blackest of black and the whitest of white. You can see when you're waving up and down, though, there's going to be a lot of jagginess and lines, and this is where smooth might matter more. See, if I come over here and put on sharpness, now it's applying a sharpening filter, but at the extent of making the image even smaller, which, yeah, that looks sharp, but then you have this tiny window, which seemingly, it seems like there's no way to undo any of that, so you really don't have an option here. As for controls, we will be doing a lot of reading. This is a fairly laid back game. You have an action, you'll have a left bump for zoom, back button is for pause, or start buttons for pause. Y opens the book. When you're reading, Y closes the book. You can use left bump and right bump to move page left and page right, respectively. B for back, and hit X for table of contents. Let's see. And then look sensitivity seems to be a large collection of titles here. There's perfect, and then the slow slide of perfect, then just slow, then struggleish, then nearly motionless, or fast slide of perfect, reasonably fast, unreasonably fast, and a parody of control. And then audio volume is at maximum. Comfortably loud. Oddly, it is weird that it starts at maximum when really it should be in the middle. Like, all games should by default be in the middle. There. That would make a lot more sense, but I've already adjusted the audio, so I'll just leave it at maximum. Yeah, I could have sworn that you could play as a female in this game. Or maybe that was an update he promised and he never delivered on. So it's a very artistic indie thing to do here, and it's a little bit of a shame, I think. I think you probably sell it better, get more sales, if there was an option here to make the game just look the way it looks. On the other hand, I would very possibly also complain about this game just looking like an asset flip game if it did look the normal way things look. I imagine there really isn't any underlying texture. Zoom in is not much, like, on the face of this character. And there is actual gameplay reasoning around the idea of not showing too much detail. It keeps everything nice and tight. What you don't see obviously doesn't affect the puzzle. It also doesn't make add in red herrings as much. But yeah, when you look at like the angles of this rope, that probably would look like a cell phone game if this was just regularly textured in. And see, we're going to go up here, and he's going to throw this up. And see, when you walk here, you grab this knob, and then you climb up. And he's going to throw up and then leave you there. Well, I guess pressing forward is not enough. You have to press A to actually make an action. And you're pretty much going to be on the ship for the rest of the game. This empty ghost ship. So, as soon as I walk far enough away, I think he'll just throw the thing. And we can see there's a memory there that we will use later. There's no jumping. There will be lower levels, and we will see many instances of the ship. It would be fairly questionable to try and do a sequel to this. Since this is the creator of Paper Please before this, I imagine what you would have is almost certainly a completely different game that happens and does something very artistic and different from him instead of trying to make a sequel to this. But you never know. Like, this sold well. Papers, Please, I think, probably sold well. I think they both probably sold well. They both were very much critically received, and I can see why. This is one of those rare cases where I kind of tend to agree with just average mainstream video game journalists, in the sense that this is trying something different and doing something different. At the core, you could call it a simplistic puzzle game with no replayability. That's true. So here we have somebody dead. And these X's are going to indicate whether a door is locked or unlocked. and that's going to be a factor. But this is hardly a hidden object game in the sense that we're going to search drawers or anything. Hmm. So I went in here and he couldn't get the briefcase up. So let's go back down here and meet with him. Maybe I was supposed to get...
It's too heavy. Take it yourself or open it here.
So when you walk to something, you put your hand on it. And that's pretty much the only actions in the game. So here you have a book. Look at his hand and how it's very low polygon. This almost feels like ASCII art. The Return of the Obra Dinn, a catalog of adventure and tragedy. It's funny that the book would be pre-printed and this wouldn't just be your journal that you were filling in. Preface: I trust now that you find yourself aboard the Obra Dinn. I expect the day to come, and my every intention was to tell the ship's strange tale within the pages of this book. Regretfully, failing health has allowed me to produce only the basic outline that follows. Your presence on the Obra Dinn is critical. I leave the discovery of its fate and the completion of this book in your hands. Seems like you're kind of at odds here in the sense that you're trying to finish a book and be an insurance adjuster, where honestly I think the insurance adjusters would probably just not actually put any effort into it and just refuse to pay out any insurance claims to anyone. Next pages will seem bewildering at first. All will make sense in time. Use the pocket watch to determine the identity and fate of everyone aboard. Complete every chapter accurately and return the book by guaranteed post to the French Office of Affairs in Morocco. The bargain chapter will remain unknown to you. I possess the details within, but I've elected to keep them private for now. Henry Evans. So Henry Evans has some connection to the Obra Dinn. That's important to know. Now we're also going to go through the story in kind of weird order. So the fact here that we have the journey, and then the ship, the crew, and then life at sea sketches, and then glossary, and then the back cover, as pointed out, to separate things. I imagine all of these chapters fall within the first four of those, I guess, because the end is at page 124 and then the glossary is 133. So, but we're going to go through the chapters in weird order. And again, a New Game Plus would have been probably appreciated at that point if you could play the game and see the whole story. There's a sort of way to do it, but it would require a lot of button presses. So we have Loose Cargo, A Bitter Cold, Murder, The Calling, Unholy Captives, Soldiers at Sea, The Doom, Bargain, and Escape. And then the end. And Bargain is the one that he's withholding information for. But each of these are going to be fairly monumentous events that happened in the journey. So, here we have the Atlantic leg of the Far East route and pictures of the image. Of course, with this resolution, there's no way to really see these images well. It almost feels like the book should be a completely different art style. And the zoom in button doesn't do anything. You really don't need these pictures, I think, for the game, but it'd be kind of nice if they did. There's a picture on the left of the complete crew and passenger manifest. I believe that information is repeated elsewhere. And then Life at Sea sketches of the Obra Dinn. I believe those pictures will be repeated elsewhere, and they will be useful. And then Loose Cargo, and then on the cargo deck. And you can see that the large amount of this book is completely empty. And that is intentional. We have to fill in everything using almost a clue/Cluedo system, where you have to identify the people, you have to identify where they die, and you have to identify how they die, which frankly is exactly Clue, except for there is just a bunch more people than 8. Let's see. This chapter will remain unknown until you leave the ship and return the book to me, H.E. And that pretty much means you have to get all of the information. I feel like there's a way to give up on this game fairly early and just get back onto the ship, get back onto this little boat dinghy and leave even if you haven't finished everything. Some of these information glossary things I feel like may have been added since the initial release, and certainly some of these words like bosun, with alternates of boatswain or bosun, is a foreman in charge of the general crew operations and the equipment required to shape this to sail the ship. Like topman is a great one, higher rated. Seamen specialized in working above the deck in the sails and rigging, so they work at the top of the sails. And then here we have a picture that is an indication of just how much of the book has been completed. Then you can hit X to go back to the table of contents, and you can hit Y. And then you're given this watch. The Memento Mortem. Remember death. And so you didn't have this before, but you're not like shocked or surprised by it either, which is kind of weird. The idea that you would get a pocket watch that could have you see the last few seconds of someone's death. I guess maybe he doesn't leave. Maybe he just stays there the whole game. You pretty much ignore him regardless. So now when you approach this person, you bring up the pocket watch. But you can't look down, so it's not like it's a compass that would point towards the next corpse. But solving this puzzle actually will help you later on in the game, because it reveals more corpses. The crew. Yeah, here's the crew, and here's where you need to fill out their form. So you're going to be doing a lot of this. And some of it is just going to come right down to, some of them are from China, some of them are from England, and so it's going to be fairly easy to separate some people out that way. But they've already given you the full manifest, so it really is just going to be a matter of identifying the name to the job, or quality as they're labeling it, more than finding a body and saying, well, this person is this person, and their job was that they were the captain or the first mate. So now we can hit A.
Captain, open the door!
All the text that's spoken is like this.
Unless we break it down and take more than those shells.
Hmm.
You bastards may take exactly what I give you.
So they're intentionally hiding things, because they don't want you to see who's speaking, in case that would explain things. But you can see here how there was a lot of 3D modeling here for a single person to have to done. It's all stationary 3D modeling pretty much, but we are frozen at the point of impact. And we can assume that this is the captain, a shirtless captain, and who shot a flintlock gun at someone. And there's this other person who got away and didn't die in that very instance. And that's pretty much it. You're given a brief amount of time to see. You can go back and look if you need to, but does that help you anything? Right now, it probably wouldn't. So that starts the game. We've got a picture of the end. Outside the captain's quarter, location of the corpse. 3 other people were present. The guy said, "Captain, who is this and how did they die?" Alright. I can say you do it from a selection. And some of these selections are repetitive, where I could say he was murdered, I think. Nope, murdered is too generic. But we know he was shot with a gun by the captain. And that's as much as we know right now. I think if we were to hit this, we get the dialogue. Interesting. And when we see this, we have better maps. And here we have a picture of this guy at this justice at sea image. So this guy, we don't know who he is. This guy, we can, I think, this person's fate is no longer blurred, which means they can now be identified. Use the book and pocket watch to gather enough information to deduce their identity. Revisit memories on the ship using the pocket watch to study relationships, appearances, and activities. Use the book's maps, crew manifest, artist sketch, along with other individual conversation logs to find out clues about. There were 60 people on the ship when it left England. Determining everyone's identity and fate will not be easy. Decisive information is rare. You will have to make assumptions using partial information. Some identities may only be revealed through a process of elimination. Good luck. This game almost feels like a take around the idea. Why is this person? Yeah, and see, he's standing right next to him, and he's wearing a hat, so he very possibly is the first mate that the captain shot, the second in charge. But where this guy came from, I have no idea, because either this is the same image as this guy, which maybe he is, but it's kind of hard to tell, particularly with these pixel graphics. And so pretty much all of these pages need to be filled in. And you don't want to oddly you don't want to run the book to the end. What you want to do is instead have it go as far as you can. And you'll run into this situation a lot where, while you might be able to see something, a lot of it's just going to be blocked off. And looking outside, you're not really going to see anything if it's not relevant. And you're not going to be able to open doors. You're just frozen in time. And then you have to walk through those doors to get back to where you were. If there was somebody up at the riggings, you wouldn't be able to see it, but since this is labeled the end, see, there was another guy. We didn't even see it. Another guy with a knife in his mouth. These probably were the last 4 people on the ship. They probably were all dead past that point. But yeah, no opening of doors. Really wavy graphics. But it kind of almost comes down to being an artistic style. And then you just have a wall. I could see players being afraid to go through the door. And what did that do? That opened this door that was locked before, remember? So reality has changed, which once again goes to show that how this is just kind of a weird, different world where reality seems to change and doors seem to magically be locked until you have more information. And we now have 2 dead bodies. So we opened it up. And we can't do anything with that yet. We won't actually be able to do anything with that for a while. So chronologically, you just don't know what happens in what order, but it eventually will explain it.
The bottom of the sea. That's a lie.
And so here you're hearing struggling. And so they're still trying to get these seashells by the sound of it. And you have a guy who's been slashed. And you've got the captain who's being stabbed or poked. Although you don't know if that was sharp poke. It looks like it, but you don't see any blood. Very nice audio. And then here's this guy coming back around. He's trying to sneak in with the knife. And I imagine get the captain. See, and I may have to just go back and look at the position of the body. Let's see. Inside the captain's quarters. This is the guy with the hat. We don't know. But we do know is there's no throat slit. So stabbed is pretty much the wrong word. Some of these verbs are a little bit weird. Like speared, for instance, you'd think would also just be stabbed, but stabbed is missing. And slashed is missed instead of knifed. And we are still saying that this guy was knifed by the captain. Alright. So they give you a timed look at the world, and then they say you can spend whatever amount of time you want on top of that timed look, which is a nice way to design a game, certainly, but it also kind of undoes the point of there being a timed version. Here we can see that this guy, when we zoom in on him, we see him now more. So zoom is actually a little bit more useful. But we are just kind of visually connecting each of the characters. This is really great for people that suffer from like recognition, face blindness, things like that. Although, in all fairness, if you have severe face blindness, you probably shouldn't play this game. And you probably would struggle to play just a lot of generic games. the door isn't always going to be in the same place, but it seems like it's going to be fairly consistent. So, yeah. I don't think we have anything more we can do. And it's not like we need to collect knives and weapons. There we can see the spear was strong, was sharpened. And let's look at this one. Ideally, we should find the truth for at least one person. Alright. So now the captain has been stabbed and this guy has been clubbed. This was the guy that was over here. So he snuck around trying to stab the captain. All three of them really trying to kill the captain. And over here we can see, I guess, the captain's wife. It's a little weird to have a female on board, but alright. Again, this world is slightly off, but well enough. Honestly, I think it would make a lot of sense to have more fantasy pirate stories these days. It's been maybe 40 or 50 years since pirates were big in fashion, and we've gone very heavy in like sci-fi, and we went very heavy in cowboys and Indians and something else. What else? Like war movies, certainly, for a brief time there. So we need. He was struck, not by any of those things. Killed by sword. Decapitated, crushed. He was clubbed by the captain. And see, now we can say unknown, enemy, and beast. As other options, and it's a bit of a spoiler there, but not too much, I would say, to say that the there will be unknown creatures and beasts and other things. In fact, the story kind of just gets ever more ridiculous as it goes forward. And now we are in a weird position where I think she was dead already. And at a certain point, you start to go into memories inside memories. So if you find a dead body in a memory, you then go into that memory. But I could be wrong about that. What you don't see here is the captain. So either the captain made it only this far with, or he only made it this far. Well, this is almost certainly the wife. Notice that they're also like bleached bones. Flies are still on them, but really no flesh. It would have been a much more gorish game if there was flesh on the creature, on the people, but if these are the people that died most recently, then this boat feels like it would have been floating for 100 years, and that doesn't make sense. So you would think that there'd be rats or something that had eaten the flesh. Alright, well.
Abigail.
So he says her name.
Brother. My friend. I shot him.
So, Abigail shares the last name with the person that was shot.
Please forgive me.
And I think in this first chapter, that's all we find out is just how this guy finally died. He sits on the chair and he shoots himself after being stabbed and speared. A lot of red herrings certainly around this. I feel like the audio needed to be as obnoxious as it is. And you can see this door is blocked, so you can't actually walk in it when you're in that first instance. I don't think there's actually a square footage you need to walk or anything. It's just the music and the timing that triggers that. Now, slightly questionable at some point whether you might mislabel somebody. And if you did mislabel somebody at that point, would you be able to change the labeling on like the picture or would you potentially have to go back in every single place where you made a mistake, undo it? And take note here, he was shot with a gun, but that's not the thing you should mark him as. So there's things here that could really have been improved. You need to mark suicide with gun. This may or may not be correct. This is the first time we've put in all the information. Fates are validated in sets of 3, so that inherently tells you that you can make mistakes and they won't immediately tell you. Correctly identifying at least 3 people and their fates will be revealed. Alright. So, if we zoom in on this guy, how do we do this? Open in the book while examining a face to flip directly to the sketch. Okay. So, this guy has the same last name as Abigail. Or, thank goodness they put her maiden name here because her last name would be WITTEREL, which is the captain, which we can also immediately mark that information if there's anything actually to mark there. I don't think there is. So, where is she? She's number 19, Hoscut. So now what we're looking for is William Hoscut, the first mate, which we thought that was pretty much it. Was the name. And we can look, I guess, briefly here and just see if there are anybody with the same last names. Seems to me like there's a couple unknowns that weren't on the passenger list, but mostly it seems like we're not going to have any repetition. There might be 2 limbs, LIM, but we're not going to run into that problem so much. So we select him, was shot with a gun by the captain. And no answer whether that's right or not. We still really don't know who this is. We still don't really know who this is. So then the next step would be to walk through the door, which feels like it's slightly repetitive to require that every time, but alright. X, 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 X. Which I guess tells us that, well, when you zoom in the map, you can see where you are. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4 people dead. And we need to figure out if we need to figure out the fates of all of them. And until we do, we can't really do anything more. And see, when we walked out of the door, we ended up back where we started, which is helpful. See, do we want to go further? Or this really is a game that will just keep on going, and it will just keep on going, and it will just keep on going. Yeah. So far, we've found the fate, but they haven't been confirmed for the captain, and the first mate. And as we go down this chapter, we'll eventually unlock another chapter. And that's really where the whole game is going to go. You can probably pretty well assume that something happened over there at some point. You can say that's a really nice moon. And you can say we'll definitely open up more parts of the ship, but we're going to stay on the ship. This is very different from the last game I just played, which was a puzzle game, wandering around a area. This is a completely different kind of murder mystery puzzle game. And you don't get too many of this. This is almost inherently what you should do with something like Clue. Like it would make a lot of sense to try, instead of just converting the board game to a PC format or a cell phone format, which would be your default move, but to instead have a mansion and have more people and have more murders. Inherently, this works because it gives you 61 murders, where Clue gives you 1 murder and a lot of shenanigans. The worst part about Clue is that you roll dice to walk around to different areas to make suggestions, not accusations, but suggestions that somebody might have killed somebody, and that's how you get more information. By eliminating that and just having an open world 3D game, you can just walk around and observe. This also would be an interesting idea as far as what you should do with a Sherlock Holmes game, whereas most Sherlock Holmes games, there's been quite a lot of them, tend to be pretty much just linear stories that you play the roles of Sherlock Holmes, but you're not really thinking like Sherlock Holmes or deducing anything most of the time. You're usually just doing unimportant things. To the point where I believe even one of the most recent ones just has like quick time events and action events in it. And I'd say the same is probably a complaint you could put on Sherlock Holmes movies too, is that more and more, every time there's a new Sherlock Holmes movie, they make him an action star and less of a detective. But yeah, at 50 minutes, I think this is as good of a place as we should go. And it's a little odd that the back button doesn't do anything. So yeah, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you could friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list, or gift me a gift card. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.